He can only be described as an opportunistic predator.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're looking at people formerly employed by the BBC who were charged with serious crimes.
And I did feel rather good there because most of the young people recognised me.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Peter Rowell. He fronted various BBC radio shows as well as some BBC Schools series, but was arrested in 2011, landing himself with dozens of historic charges throughout the year. Unlike some other infamous figures, Rowell didn't do his victims the justice of pleading guilty to the crimes, instead taking the whole thing to trial, though he eventually admitted to the charges. By then, charges of possessing indecent images had also been brought against him, which he also admitted to early in 2012. He was put on the sex offenders register and slammed with a 6-year prison sentence. Upon leaving prison, Rowell changed his name. Hugh Edwards.
Hugh Edwards was the BBC's highest paid newsreader, fronting first the 6 o'clock news and then the news at 10.
In 2023, it made headline news that the BBC's most lauded newsreader, Hugh Edwards, was being investigated for sexual misconduct. The news broke in The Sun and was covered relentlessly by the BBC.
But Hugh Edwards hasn't been on our screens for a year, following reports in the Sun newspaper claiming he'd paid a young person for explicit images.
The police announced at the time that there was no evidence, but in July 2024, it came out that Edwards had been arrested and charged on 3 counts of making indecent images of minors. Perhaps more shocking was that the BBC knew that he'd been arrested back in November, but asked the police not to make this public.
The BBC is facing questions about why Hugh Edwards, having been suspended, remained on a full salary and had a £40,000 pay rise.
Up until the following April, Edwards was still on the Beeb's payroll, and they didn't even sack him, instead waiting for him to resign himself. He's pled guilty to the charges. Daniel Frogdson.
I'm gonna save Queenie too.
In February 2024, BAFTA-nominated actor Daniel Frogdson, who most notably starred in His Dark Materials, but was also known for roles on CBBC, was given a suspended sentence for viewing Category A images of minors. Aged only 21, Frogdson was given an 8-month sentence and ordered onto a rehabilitation program. He will also be on the sex offenders register for a decade. For 4 years until he was caught, he downloaded hundreds of the harrowing images, with police eventually tracking his IP address to find out that he was the culprit. The judge who presided over the sentencing described Frogson's crimes as sickening. Chris Langham.
This morning I had a chat with my very good friend, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Yes.
Still best known for playing Hugh Abbott in the first 2 series of The Thick of It, Langham's long career ended in 2007, when he was found guilty of possessing indecent images.
Terry, I love doing things the right way, that ethical stuff. I love it. I mean, we all do. But
like Frogdson, he was handed a custodial sentence, in this case 6 months, and was put on the sex offenders register. Langham's defence was rather bizarre though, saying that he was actually doing research into a similarly disturbed character for an upcoming sitcom, which was thoroughly disputed by fellow comedian Paul Whitehouse.
We're going to have to do a number of things. Almost immediately.
Langham was also found not guilty of numerous other serious charges. The only charges that stuck were the ones relating to him using his credit card to buy the images in question.
I shouldn't have been sucked in, I was sucked in!
Dave Lee Travis.
The former Radio 1 DJ Dave Lee Travis has been arrested.
In 2012, Operation U-Tree was launched by the Metropolitan Police, and Dave Lee Travis is the first of many ex-BBC employees we're going to be talking about who was arrested because of it. His career began on pirate radio, but he eventually found his way onto Radio 1 and Top of the Pops, 2 places that were full to bursting with wrong-uns in the 1970s.
Tonight, the BBC was planning on running a 1977 episode of Top of the Pops, which featured Dave Lee Travis. They have decided tonight to pull that programme.
In 2013, he was charged with more than a dozen counts of indecent assault of various women and girls, some under the age of consent, but was found not guilty.
The DJ was convicted of groping a woman who worked on the Mrs. Merton show in the 90s.
The police kept going and found more historic offences, and he was ultimately handed a 3-month suspended sentence after being convicted in 2014.
According to the judge, the veteran DJ thought he could get away with the attack because of his celebrity status.
Chris Denning.
Yeah, the show's Where It's At on the BBC Live programme, and this is Chris Denning with you right through until 5 o'clock.
Another disc jockey. Chris Denning was the very first voice people heard back in 1964 when BBC Two hit the television screens. He then had a long career in BBC Radio and helped get another notorious offender, Gary Glitter, his start in music.
Some of Chris Denning's victims were in court this morning to watch him face the 24 counts of indecent assault.
He was one of the few BBC stars to be arrested for sex offences during his career in the 70s and 80s, going to prison for over a year in 1985. He was convicted again in 1988 and 2000, but it took until 2005 for British police to arrest him for even more crimes.
It took time to read all the charges to him. 21 times he answered that he was guilty.
He spent much of the 21st century being ferried between different countries to face charges in each one, and was also, unsurprisingly, investigated for Operation U-Tree as well.
But it was Radio 1 that brought him fame, here with the original lineup, and again for a reunion 30 years later.
Steve Kish. This ex-BBC star wasn't doing things with children, but disturbingly, with dogs.
So Steve, let's talk about balloon dogs, specifically the record for the fastest time to make one.
He was known for attempting to break and set new world records under the name Sizzling Steve on the kids show Officially Amazing, but in 2021 pled guilty to charges of possessing offensive images of people and animals.
I'm feeling good. I mean, I've been around dogs all my life, so I know all the joints in a dog. So
the images were found during a 2018 search of his home. Police confiscated Kish's own pet dog, though worryingly, he was running a dog walking business for years before all this came out.
I hear that your dog is your closest confidant as well. I mean, is he confident about this record? Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
He's since been banned from owning or being around dogs, though he was only given a 6-month sentence. Unfortunately, he still holds dozens of world records. Stuart Hall.
Stuart Hall has fallen a long way.
He was a well-known figure at the BBC for years and presented many of its football shows, as well as fronting various quizzes, doing voiceovers and presenting lots of radio shows.
Will you apologise on camera to your victim?
Excuse me? I have no comment to make at this stage.
Though he started looking dodgy as early as the 1970s, when he was accused of slipping something in a policeman's drink to get off a speeding charge, much more serious allegations came to light in 2012. These weren't part of U-Tree, but Hall's victims were emboldened to point the finger by U-Tree's findings the same year.
I struggled, I tried to push him away.
Many more women came forward, and he was hit with numerous charges, and though he initially professed his innocence, in 2013 he pled guilty to all of them and ended up spending time behind bars.
Whether in public or private, Hall would first approach under friendly pretences and then bide his time until the victim was isolated.
Rolf Harris. Far more beloved by the British public than anyone else on this list, Harris's downfall hit hard. But he was just as guilty as the other people convicted by Operation U-Tree, and was another who pled not guilty and made his victims go through multiple trials. Not all of the charges stuck, but in June 2014, he was found guilty of a dozen counts of indecent assault spanning decades, most of them relating to his daughter's friends, whom he had access to.
For decades, the children's TV presenter had hidden in plain sight, even fronting this safety campaign to warn kids about predatory adults.
He tried to appeal, but was denied, spending 3 years locked up in HMP Stafford. His MBE, OBE, CBE, and other honours were revoked during his prison sentence.
Other touches give you a no feeling. It's like
No, I don't know why I don't like that, but I'm not too sure about that at all.
Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy, you've never been married and you don't seem to have a very high regard of women. Oh. Do you feel that women are inferior to you?
It was in response to allegations made against Savile after his death in 2011 that Operation U-Tree was launched in the first place, and all of these historic offenders faced a monumental reckoning.
But at the heart of what went on are a series of criminal allegations about the behaviour of Sir Jimmy Savile.
But he's also the only person in this video who wasn't arrested and charged for his crimes, because it took his death for his victims, who numbered in the hundreds, to feel safe enough to come forward. But perhaps if the BBC hadn't been covering up what he'd been doing, he would have faced justice while alive.
Was child protection on your radar as an issue back then?
I have to say I don't suppose it was. It's an awful thing to say, isn't it? But no.
The cover-up continued even in the aftermath of his death, when an episode of Newsnight investigating Savile was pulled from broadcast out of fear it would tarnish his reputation too much. Let us know in the comments whether you think the BBC is still fit for purpose.
I am a 14-year-old boy in a 68, 150-year-old horrible body.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.